All right, it is Thursday, August 31st, 2023. And folks, you are listening or watching the MMA Eco Live podcast, live from beautiful and finally rainy Portland, Oregon in the USA. Hey guys, I'm your host. My name is Chris Presnell. I am the host and owner of MMA Ecosystem in this podcast. I report on Asian MMA and work for or have worked for lots of different publications. Currently work for myself at MMA Ecosystem and work for Tapology. Also worked as a manager before, and glad to have you here where we're going to kind of go over the schedule and as well as last weekend in Asian MMA. And then I will take your questions at the in the second half of the show. So whenever you want, you can go ahead and drop those questions. If you have not already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. What better time than now? If you've been a long-time listener, why not subscribe? If this is your first time, it's up to you, but no harm, no foul. Unsubscribe if you hate the content. So would appreciate that. Before I get into the topics of MMA, one housekeeping item is that long overdue, but I am going to have moderators from here on out. So I've had some folks step up and willing to do that, and it is finally time to do that. I did not expect this channel to need moderators, I guess, like this early on. I expected this podcast to be absolutely tiny and watched by almost no one for 6 months to a year. The first part of its life is this is a newer YouTube channel, but the good news is that it has grown, not to be gigantic by any means. I mean, you can see the numbers for yourself, but like bigger than counting on your one hand how many people are watching. So that's great. Really appreciate that. But inevitably on YouTube, unfortunately, it can turn into a little bit of a weird situation sometimes, and sometimes not the most safe of environments. So I really want to let this be a safe place to where you feel safe posting your comments, your questions, without feeling like you're going to get bitten back on, or feeling like there are folks that are just stirring the pot, making this an angry cesspool. So I admit that I was a little bit slow to bring on the moderators, but I am going to have those going forward. So really look forward to being able to keep this a little bit of a, just a kinder space. And I don't mind, I think the thing is, like, I don't mind. I actually really appreciate it and love it when you all interact with each other. But this isn't like the time, like this is not the space to like debate other people or bite back on other people in the chat. If you want to do that outside of this channel through social media, of course, I'm never like a supporter of hostility or negativity on the internet in that kind of way, like a person-to-person kind of way. But that's up to you if you want to take it up with other people, but just don't do it publicly in the chat. Like, that's just, of all the places, that's just not the place to do it. So yeah, appreciate your cooperation on that. Hopefully this will allow more and more people to feel comfortable here. So yeah, but with that said, let's get into last weekend. Last weekend, guys, we had so much MMA going on. Most of you are familiar with the big stuff, Road to UFC, UFC Singapore, that stuff. But there was a lot of other stuff that went on. There was a JCK event. There was a WKG event. The WKG event is the one outside of the Singapore stuff that I want to get to. Check out this event, guys. This was a really solid offering from WKG. They put on these shows with M1, and usually they're pretty good shows. They only have maybe 2 a year, but when they do, they give us the goods. So if you look at this card, there's a couple Koreans on the card. Lee Zhong-woo, who is a UFC Shanghai PI guy, looking really good, really young, unbull fight. Climbed to 5-1 with unanimous decision over this Tajik guy. And then elsewhere on the card, another unbull fight guy, Roga Jun, also won a unanimous decision over Gonzorig. Gonzorig, I swear, this guy's been fighting every other week in China. But let's just look at this guy's schedule, because I just added another upcoming fight for this guy in Inner Mongolia province. Just look at this dude's schedule. So, good Lord. Okay, in 2022, he fought 3 times. In 2023, since April, look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And he's scheduled for his 7th fight in 5 months in September. This dude has been, I have some serious concerns about this guy's health, honestly, because when he fought Huang Yele in WLF, the corner stopped the fight because it looked like he had some kind of issue going on with his mouth, or his jaw. So hopefully this guy's staying healthy, not pushing himself way beyond his limits. But yeah, he does have another fight coming up with a newer promotion in Inner Mongolia in a couple weeks. But he lost a decision to Roga Jun. Elsewhere on the card, Lee Muhag got back in the win column, JCK finalist from a few years ago. Xia Lianyang lost a decision to this Tajik guy. Xia, if you remember, is a guy I used to manage and really believed a lot in this guy. I still honestly do, but unfortunately, he lost the fight, and I believe he might have broken his hand again. He injured his hand again. He's going to have surgery once again on his hand, I learned today. And for the time being, it looks like he's probably going to be retiring as well, unfortunately. He is just, I think he's had there's 4 times his hand has gotten messed up in fights. And for him, he's just like, this just keeps happening. And what's the point of just literally injuring myself in the exact same way in every single fight? So, I mean, I totally understand why you would retire if it just keeps happening over and over and over again. He said he wants to keep training and coaching, so that's great. But unfortunate to see that with Xiao Lianyang. Really had a bright future. Hands of stone. He punched too hard for what his hands could take. I'll put it that way. But yeah, really heavy hands. Zhou Wang got revenge on Yadali Wulatabeka by head kick. That was a neat little finish. Ibu Gola won by split decision. And then in the main event, Ahajung Alinuar beat this Japanese guy, Ryo Takagi, by guillotine choke in the first round. Alinuar, he's a prospect to look out for sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if he's at the PI. I think he might be, but I honestly can't remember. I haven't seen him in a lot of social media there. So that was WKG. Otherwise, guys, last weekend in Singapore, Road to UFC, I did just put out a video. Was that Tuesday morning? No, early yesterday morning, on all of my thoughts about Road to UFC and UFC Singapore. More Road to UFC stuff, kind of looked over some of the biggest surprises, upsets, and then previewed the finals. As far as UFC Singapore goes, I really only touched on the Aaron Blanchfield fight in the main event. I think I talked about Song Kanan a little bit, but yeah, UFC Singapore, honestly, a really solid event. Really enjoyed it. There's a little bit of everything. I love the way they put the card together, even though it wasn't a very Asia focused card, or it didn't feature a lot of top Asian prospects outside of course, Korean Zombie, Rinya Nakamura, even Song Kanan. But for the most part, a lot of their top Korean and Chinese fighters were not on the card. Tetsuro Taira fighting in October. But they filled it in with a lot of great other prospects and some solid fights. There's kind of 2 or 3 co-main events of that event. You had Giga Chikadze against Caceres. Tyler Santos and Aaron Blanchfield, and the actual co-main Anthony Smith and Ryan Spann. But really solid stuff all the way around. I think what I saw from the numbers from their gate is that it made just like, or I think there was just 500 fewer people that attended this event than the UFC 275 pay-per-view last year. So that's pretty good considering the difference in prominence of events. And I think they said it was their highest grossing fight night card for Singapore, which would put it up against like 3 or 4 other fight night cards. So overall, that's pretty good, right? Like they had a pay-per-view last year, and then they had a really successful weekend this weekend. It seemed like there were a lot of Korean fans that flew to Singapore to visit and watch the Korean Zombie fight. I think that probably helped them a lot. Last year they had John Wei Lee on the card, but yeah, Korean Zombie showing out really hard. I thought that he gave the absolute best performance that he could. He honestly had Max Holloway, I don't want to say hurt, but he definitely clocked Max Holloway a couple of times, far more often than I expected him to. So this wasn't the absolute bloodbath that we all thought it would be, even though, yes, Zombie did still get knocked out cold, but it felt like he went out on his sword rather than it being too painful to watch. So I did appreciate that. It seemed like he gave his A game, and yeah, that's a wrap on Korean Zombie. I don't remember what was the actual first Zombie fight that I watched, but I do remember watching the Korean Zombie versus Leonard Garcia fight on that WEC card. That was like sort of it was the I think it was the Aldo versus Faber card, where it didn't really have the WEC branding because the UFC had purchased it, and both those guys, Faber and Aldo, were on their way to the UFC. But I remember watching that and just having my nose just inches from the TV, thinking this is the best thing I'd ever seen. Little did I know that like so many of Zombie's best performances, if not all of them, were still to come. The making his UFC debut to the Twister in against that was the rematch against Leonard Garcia, and then the 7-second knockout of Mark Hominick, the Darce submission over Dustin Poirier in the 4th round in Virginia. Really just so many, like, I mean, he just kind of like won the like UFC bingo of everything that you can do, right? Short of getting a UFC title. Although he did get 2 title shots. Those did not go great against Aldo and Volkanovski, but aside from that, Zombie has looked incredible. And then there was the Rodriguez fight. Even though he lost that in the last second, still one of the best fights ever, going down from Denver on the what was that, the 25th anniversary, I think? That's right, yeah, 25th anniversary that was in Denver. But yeah, I mean, Zombie's done it all. He's Hall of Famer. He's the most influential fighter to come out of South Korea by a long shot. As far as like Asian fighters as a whole, that's harder to answer because we've got a long history of really good fighters from Pride and like Sakuraba. But at least in the last like 10, 15 years, probably it's him and John Wei Lee, I would say, unless I'm like severely forgetting someone. I mean, unless you count Central Asia fighters too, like Valentina Shevchenko in there too. But yeah, Zombie, maybe the most influential male Asian fighter from the last 10 or 15 years, like the modern era of UFC. So love that guy. He's going to be missed. One of the most beloved fighters in the sport. So yeah, Korean Zombie MMA still going strong, still pumping out great fighters. So spirit of Zombie lives on through his gym. Yeah, so you had that, and then JCK. Oh, and anything for Road to UFC. I covered this pretty extensively in the video I watched, so I won't duplicate that if you've already watched that video. But I did really enjoy those fights. So many of them were really close fights, or I think there was only one that went to a finish. That was Lee Chong-ho against Darmisi. I think y'all are going to see Darmisi really improve after that fight. He looked sensational for the first, 2 rounds of that fight. And then in the 3rd round, just absolutely the bottom dropped out. And he just went from 100 to 0, opposite of 0 to 100. But yeah, just dropped out and couldn't do anything, was basically just helpless off of his back. And Lee Chong-ho, really, really strong guy. He had the better conditioning and deserved to win that fight. But fortunately for Darmisi, a lot of those problems are fixable problems. He's got a great team of PI that can help him work on his energy management, his cardio and conditioning. So I expect we'll see him back. I would think maybe he'll just get right back in the mix for Road to UFC next year. But he's a really young guy. I think he could be really popular with both Chinese and Kazakh fans, as he's a Kazakh ethnic minority. But yeah, otherwise, go check out the video I posted the other day, and excited for the finals. Trying to figure out if they're going to go down. Just trying to nail down a date for that. We may not get that for a couple weeks still, but seeing as tomorrow is September, or even today if you're watching this in a particular time zone, but seeing as September is around the corner, and we'll probably know the full UFC schedule within the next couple weeks or the rest of 2023, I would think we'll probably know about China relatively soon. They're going to try and shore that up. So I'll see if I can get that out there for you guys before the UFC announces it. Otherwise, if you have any questions about the weekend, feel free to shoot them to me. But we've got one Friday fights, 31, so they were able to get some MMA fights for that. I believe only one Asian fighter on the MMA side of that. I think for the most part, it's a couple Russian guys. Gajimurad Gasan Gusainov versus Ilambek Akilbek Ulu. That guy is the Kyrgyz guy. And then the other fight, Kurbanali Isabekov versus Abdukoder Abdursurov. Let me just take a look at this Kyrgyz guy real quick. See if we have him up on Tapology. Couple good one championship events coming up end of September and October, right? Okay, so Ilambek Akilbek Ulu, 7-1 fighter, and they're going to be fighting at 139 pounds. I'm guessing that's like that'd be like a 63 kg catch weight. And then the other fight, Isabekov is a Russian guy fighting Uzbek. That's Abdu Sorov, 5-1 guy. They're fighting at 176, which is probably 70, 80 kg maybe. Some interesting catch weights. I think these fights came together pretty late. So a couple Central Asian guys fighting tomorrow in Thailand. Let's see. Oh, we got a new Chinese promotion is debuting this Saturday. That's going to be Shanghai MMA Championship 1. Obviously, you know where it is, Shanghai. But yeah, a couple gyms coming up in Shanghai. You got Dragon MMA, Animal MMA. Got Dongjunga Fight, which has some pretty good fighters there. They've got Wu Zatsubieka trains there. Ding Miao trains there. What's that guy? Yeridana, Chinese Kazakh guy, Yeridana trains there. But it's a newly formed gym, but I think there's a lot of Chinese Kazakhs that train out of there, interestingly enough, in Shanghai. But let me show you this card real quick. It's a pretty decent card for a first Chinese event. Although I think the original main event did fall out and I'm not sure how to watch this event just yet, but I will let you all know. I'll try to figure it out. It may be like an online pay-per-view, actually, judging by like the pricing on there. But yeah, so you've got kind of a weird main event there, but you do have Arigula, the Mongolian Chinese guy of JCK, fighting this guy Ding Junting. I think he was supposed to fight someone different. Did I have him down? Yeah, I had him fighting this other guy, Liang Zichang. That fight got canceled, but Arigula taking a pretty big step backwards in competition from his JCK fights against Ding Junting. Honestly, that's totally fine. Get some wind back under your sails there. One championship vet, Liu Peng Shuai on the card. Chi Hai Lin of China Top Teams on the card. This guy, Wally Bieka, trains out of Dongjunga in Shanghai. But yeah, I mean, for your first card, they've got a couple veteran names on there. So I will, if I can find a stream, I'll watch it. But otherwise, find the post the updates, the results after the fact. But so yeah, Shanghai MMA Championship, just one of the many promotions that are popping up in China. A lot of these events are kind of one-off events tied to other holidays or cultural events. But this one seems like they're going to be putting on multiple shows. So waiting to hear also what WLF's next event is. They have monthly events, so they should have one coming up the next couple weeks. Haven't heard anything about that. JCK, they announced their next event for September 9th, I believe. Excuse me. Yeah. Some pretty good fights on there. Shamuhar, Idoli Bieka, good fighter. Aping Shala fighting Nurtai Kazibai. That's a really good fight. Two really good prospects there. Some other fun fights on the card. Those are the two main ones that have been that I'm interested in coming up. So, and then the only other event going down that I know of this weekend is SOMA Fight Series. Let me see. I was gonna have a graphic for that because I don't believe it is all the way on Tapology yet. But SOMA Fight Series 10 goes down from Bali, Indonesia, put on by SOMA Fight Club, which is also in Bali. And so there's a lot of Indonesian fighters. There's also a lot of foreign fighters on the card, Australians, Russians, all throughout Europe. So those are always fun events. I don't know if they have a live stream for that. Usually they haven't in the past, but they're pretty good at posting results for that. So check their page or mine for those results. Otherwise, we also had Alash Pride 88 go down this morning from Kazakhstan, I believe from a city called Taraz. So not a whole lot to report there. The main event was pretty entertaining. The guy walked out to the cage. One of his buddies next to him had a live golden eagle on his arm. Another guy had a giant battle axe. So that was kind of cool. And then he went out there and had an amazing performance. I need to find this guy's name, see if we've got the results. You can check the results on my Instagram story at MMA Ecosystem. Otherwise, out of respect to this guy, let me just get his name real quick. Kazakh guy, 3-0 Kazakh guy. It was Ansar Kasimjanov beat Bobor Abdulazimov. He beat him by first round TKO. Hit him with a knee that just kind of shut him down, hit a knee to the gut, and then some follow-up punches. But before that, the fight was a total banger. Check it out on YouTube on Alash Pride's YouTube channel. But yeah, that concludes events. We should be getting the Matrix Fight Night 13 card in its entirety really soon. Krishna Shroff went on Instagram today and said that the card would be coming out on Friday. So for me in the States, Thursday. So that could be even in a couple hours. We could be getting that Matrix Fight Night card. She said that we'll be getting the return of a really big fan favorite, which it's Badakshi, guys. I'll just tell you there. Last I heard, the bout agreement had not been signed when I last heard, against potentially a Korean guy. But yeah, hopefully they're not mad at me for saying that. I'm not gonna tell you who the whole fight is. At least last I heard, it was Badakshi. I'm not saying that fight contract had not been signed, but with her saying a massive fan favorite, I'm like, okay, Badakshi is probably the most popular fighter they have on their roster, so it's probably him. She also said that a rematch that is a long time coming, that like really needs to happen, it's going to be at the event, and also the return of potentially India's best prospect. So when I interviewed Krishna Shroff and Aisha Shroff a few months back before MFN 12, Krishna said that their top 5 fighters were Badakshi and Pooja Tomar, and who else did she say? Sanjeet Budwar, Shyam Anand, forgetting the 5th name, but I'm guessing it's going to be one of those names. I would say maybe Sanjeet Budwar. He had to drop out of his MFN 12 fight just because of illness, so hopefully he's back as well. But yeah, MFN 13, probably end of October. Not sure the location yet. We'll know that in just a couple short hours. All right, let us get to your questions, y'all. Yes. Jimmy, check your email. I emailed you back today. What's up? Good to hear from you. It's Kupo. Night of the underdogs for Road to UFC semifinals. Man, you said it. Like, Jinyu Shurye looking amazing against Choi Sung-gu. Not gonna like pretend that was the most exciting fight, but a pretty flawless game plan and like a clean sweep against a former finalist for Road to UFC, right? Really impressed by Jinyu Shurye's performance. Xiaolong, probably a massive underdog against Shuya Kamikubo. He brought out his best performance maybe of his whole career. He's still kind of putting the pieces together, but a massive step forward for him, beating a really good fighter, potentially like the biggest favorite of, like the biggest fighter that people are like, yeah, for sure, he's going to win the whole bracket. Xiaolong just beat that guy and beat him somewhat convincingly. Might have just been, I don't know if it was an off night for Shuya Kamikubo. He didn't look to be like in the best shape. Some of that, I think, is his demeanor too. Just kind of like they're announcing his name and he's just like sitting with his butt on the ground against the cage. Kind of a hard guy to read, but yeah, I'm not sure what was going on there. But Xiaolong took it to him for sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there was some pretty cool grappling in the JJ versus Leong Na fight. Did you catch that? Oh yeah, I did. What's Na's future in the UFC? She's lost all of her fights, but they're pretty fun to watch. I think she would be best served exiting the UFC, going back somewhere like WLF, maybe even. I think Leong Na needs to. I think she needs a pretty big change in her career. I think one of those changes could be leaving the UFC. I think another change could be changing where she trains or changing something with where she trains, whether that's spending more time at the UFC PI or maybe going to Thailand like a lot of her Chinese countrymen and women have already. I think that could be a good option for her. But yeah, maybe fighting with WLF, getting her legs back under her, and then, I don't know, maybe like a UAE Warriors or something like that. She could, I mean, maybe even come to the US. There's, go to a Team Alpha Male. That could really help a lot of the things that she struggles with. Oh, and speaking of Alpha Male, I need to mention it because it's a Road to UFC alum, but also he's my guy. Liu Kai, I just found out yesterday, is coming back to action at Uriah Faber's A1 Combat this Saturday night. So he's fighting Jacob Rosales, American guy, and they were supposed to fight earlier in August, but that fell through for whatever reason. But that fight has been rescheduled for this Saturday night. So catch that on UFC Fight Pass, Luke Kai versus Jacob Rosales. But yeah, back to Liang Na. I agree. She is just she's so wild, guys, and that's why you're right. She's so exciting, but yeah, she's like all offense, no defense. Really loves the arm bar, throws wild haymakers, but yeah, she just needs to tighten things up. I love the guys at Long Yuan MMA. I think they're a good team, but she needs to tighten things up, and now is the time to do it. She's like 26 or 27 years old. So now is the time to do it. She still could have a lot of life left for her career if she makes the switch to somewhere like in Thailand or even an alpha male. Work with some of her Chinese teammates there and just change things up. I think that would really help her out a lot. Yeah, sorry to put that on the screen. What do you mean by Huya subletting UFC rights from Migu? Is Migu over? No, it's not. By the way, I saw that on Migu there was 1.2 million watching at UFC 292. You think that reported that? Asked Dana about the 1.8 billion misspoke. Well, 1.2 million watching it live would be different than 1.8 billion views on the highlights. I think I don't know if it was you that I responded to, who that was, but yeah, there was a report that said 1.8 billion views on the highlights from UFC 292. I have no idea how they calculated that, and if that's just the views that are shown on videos. And there are so many social media apps in China. I don't know how they got all of those, what they considered a highlight, or just some kind of video related to Weili for 292. But I just looked at like Douyin today to see if I could see if there's anything to that. And their 292 stuff got like, just on Douyin probably got like, I think 330,000 views the night of. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know where they're getting that number. That still seems kind of absurd to me. It might have just been, I don't know, something got lost somewhere, some miscommunication. But so with Huya, yeah, they're another streaming app, almost like I feel like there's a lot of gamers that stream through Huya. I'm saying this for the folks that aren't Chinese and don't know what it is, but maybe almost like kind of a Twitch situation. But there is a lot of events. Like there's actually an MMA promotion called Huya FC that puts on like one MMA fight a year streamed through Huya, the app and website. But yeah, so subletting just means that no, Migu deal isn't over. Nothing's changing with Migu. It just means that basically Huya went to Migu and just said like, hey, here's a brick of cash. Can we also stream things on Huya that are being streamed on Migu? And Migu was like, yeah, I guess so. So no idea what that kind of deal is like, but I was trying to, I've been looking at a lot of rights deals this week with Asian broadcast companies to kind of see like which ones are coming up, which ones are going to be, could be changing hands or renegotiated soon. Migu started in either 2019 or 2021. I think it's 2019, around the same time the PI opened. Just bringing up my document where I wrote all that down, but yeah, I'm not sure how long that deal is. Usually a deal that's really big like that would be somewhere around 5 years. So that would go until the end of next year. But man, I don't know why the UFC would leave Migu. I mean, they've been a phenomenal partner, really phenomenal partner. But yeah, hold on just a second. I'll tell you when that rights deal started. In other rights deal news, the rights deal for India expires at the end of this year. They have a deal with Sony 10 Sports, and that deal expires end of 2023. So that could be interesting to watch that with MMA growing pretty rapidly in India, and they now have their first. Granted, he hasn't really proven himself in the UFC yet, but they have Anshul Jugli, potential for more Indian fighters going forward. Will be interesting to see if the UFC will try to do something bigger in India. I don't really know what the footprint of Sony 10 Sports is in India, but for sure they're probably renegotiating now on that deal for India. But okay, yeah. So for China, the Migu deal started in 2021. So if that's a 5-year deal, that would go until 2026. We're only halfway through that, so long ways to go on the Migu deal still. If it's a 5-year deal, with as big and as deeply invested as Migu is, I would expect it to be a longer-term deal. Sad to see Zombie go out like that, but did you enjoy Max Holloway teaching us how to defuse a counterpuncher with feints and use of his jab? Absolutely. I mean, who doesn't like watching Max Holloway fight? He's always a masterclass. He's always like levels deeper than anyone else striking, except maybe Volkanovski. But yeah, love that. You said it well. You're saying, I think you understood my question from last week. When I say resources that analysts and bettors were complaining about, it has more to do with Weili getting special treatment from coaches like Hinger, Hickman brothers, and having a dedicated film scout doing work for her. They made the argument that the factors surrounding Weili's training is an unfair advantage compared to the low-level training that Lemos was getting. It is. I think maybe I see what you're saying of like. I still don't agree that it's an unfair advantage, just because it is like this is MMA where everyone's an independent contractor. Everyone doesn't have access to all the same resources, and it's not like Amanda Lemos is a a regional fighter. She's been a ranked UFC fighter for a long time. She probably, if she wanted to change gyms, she probably could. If she wanted to hire someone to do different kinds of tape studies, she probably could. But that, yeah, she could. Like she has chosen to stay at her gym. She's not being forced there because she can't afford to go anywhere else. Like she wants to be at that gym. She likes and enjoys the relationship that she has with her coaches, who have brought her to the point of a UFC title fight. So it's not like it's a scrub gym. Like they have been able to do great work with Amanda Lemos. Is there much more work that could be done? Absolutely. But I don't buy that like somehow Weili has like this amazing unfair advantage of like she's been given things that, I mean, she's been a champion and defended her belt. So yeah, she has the means and the connections to be able to travel around a little bit. It's just two fighters at different places in their career, to be honest. I think hopefully that answered your question. I don't know if you know the news, but apparently Kevin Chong, after Singapore, flew to Jakarta and checked out the new arena there with the sports minister. We might see a new city for the UFC as soon as next year. I didn't see that. Kevin Chong is a guy that I will definitely look that up. I've tried to get in touch with that guy, or at least just like he's nowhere to be found on any kind of social media or like anything. So I didn't see that. I wonder. That's so interesting. Like I did see. So there's two brand new UFC Asia Instagram pages. There's one for Thailand and also a UFC Indonesia Instagram page that are brand new. So for that, I think Asia, UFC had just had a Korea page, and then on Twitter they've got like a UFC Asia page and a UFC Japan page. But yeah, that is really interesting that. Okay. Probably this is an official page. Probably. There's no, it's not a verified page yet, and it's got 412 followers, but it is a newer page. It's all like, and it's posting the same kind of stuff that UFC would. Actually, how long has this page been around? Let's just see about this account. Yeah, joined February 2023. So I don't know, maybe they might have just started the count just to let it age a little bit. I don't know if that's actually an official account, but UFC obviously wants to go in big with Indonesia. Having an event in Indonesia in 2024 could be a little bit too early, simply because there's not the UFC level talent from Indonesia right now to put on that card. There's like maybe one or two other fighters that they could sign, but maybe for like end of the year 2024. I don't know. It seems to me like if you're going to go to Indonesia, you want to have at least like, I don't know, 5 or 6 Indonesian fighters on that event. No doubt it would be a huge commercial business success for the UFC. So, I mean, they could just, maybe I take that back, because they've had events in Singapore the last couple years, and they're not necessarily featuring Singaporean fighters on that event. So for them, they might be thinking, why don't we just move our Southeast Asia base of operations from Singapore to Jakarta? That could be their thinking. When I was looking at rights deals this week, I remember that the UFC signed a deal with the Singapore Tourism Board or whatever, and I was going back to see how long that deal ran. And as far as I know, that deal is up with Singapore. So they signed that deal in 2018 to hold annual events in Singapore. And so that started with their 2018 event. Then they had a 2019 event. And then 2020 they skipped. I believe 2021 they skipped. And then they came back in 2022, right? And then they just had the 2023 event. So they've fulfilled that 3 or 3 event obligation. So that I don't believe, as far as I know, they have any obligation to Singapore. It might make sense to me to go to Jakarta instead of Singapore. So if that's the case, then that makes a lot of sense to me, especially if they're gonna, having Road to UFC events next year. They'll probably have one in China. They could have one in Abu Dhabi, although the timing's kind of weird on that. But yeah, that could make a lot of sense. I'll have to look up on that. Appreciate that heads up. Oh, and by the way, y'all, I've had some weird stuff going on with my camera battery. You noticed last week it cut out. So basically, I lost something that allows me to be able to plug in and not have to worry about that. And I thought I had that worked out. I actually got a replacement for it, but that replacement is also broken. So if the stream drops at like the top of the hour, just sit tight. I'll be back on in like 20 seconds. So sorry about that. But do you remember Zombie's beef with Ortega? That seemed contrived, considering that both are friends with Henry Gracie. What's the point of the contrived beef? Doesn't make the fight point. Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember that. It seems like at least now the two guys are pretty good friends. Like Ortega posted something really nice about Zombie after his retirement. Maybe it was contrived. I don't really remember that, to be honest. Makoto's saying, I calculated the views from Weibo, Douyin, and Migo, and it adds up to 50 million, which isn't even close to 1.8, but yeah, not even close. What do you think of MMA Junkie reporting payout that the main fighters get paid less than the 115 champ, even though Aljo has a longer reign than Weili. Well, yeah, Junkie didn't. It wasn't even necessarily that they reported it. Those were the disclosed payouts by the Massachusetts Athletic Commission, as far as I'm concerned. So asking about main event fighters getting paid less. Yeah, Weili did make, of course, she doesn't even have a win bonus. She just gets a flat fee. I imagine that won't last long with Sean O'Malley. He'll probably get a new contract at some point. If his star continues to rise, he has all the makings of like a mega star for the UFC. But like, I mean, think about all that Weili has done for China in the UFC. And like Aljamain Sterling has not like broken that kind of ground for the UFC. So I don't know. It's like O'Malley is still somewhat young in his UFC career. He's just now at that championship level. Weili has been there for a while. It doesn't surprise me that Weili gets paid more than either of those guys just because of what she has done for China. She has made the UFC so much money in China. So that makes sense that she would share in that a little bit. Do you think having, what's WrestleJamia? Jamia? Gosh. Road to UFC semis were really boring, but I'd imagine the fighters want to be in the best condition for December. That's what I kind of said on my recap video for Singapore, is that like, this isn't Contender Series. Fighters are not trying to go out in the semifinals and campaign to Dana White that they're the most entertaining fighter and should be signed. What counts in Road to UFC? All right. Sorry, we're back on. Told you that would happen. But we're back on. So, but yeah, back to your question. Yeah, these guys they're not trying to impress the boss to show that they're the most entertaining fighter. All that matters is getting to the finals. And with the schedule that they have to keep up, fighting May, August, December, probably a lot of guys are injured, and that could either like hold back some of their performances, or like, what if Lee Kai Win, like if he's really injured, fighting the most like safe, like I got to protect my body as much as I can to let it heal, not get drawn into like a war. The fight he fought made perfect sense, even though it was risky fighting a fight with that little volume thrown. But yeah, I can definitely forgive them for this middle round. The opening round, you're going to see a lot more finishes just because all the guys on the lowest tier of skill are being weeded out, and they're being put up against a lot of the higher level guys. So you're probably going to see more finishes in that opening round. And then in the finals, hopefully if everyone's healthy, fighters will be campaigning a lot more. Of course, like they don't even have to, it's not a Contender Series even there where they have to like impress the boss. If they win, they get the contract. If they lose, I'm not even really sure what the UFC's logic is with the losers, because Kazama got a contract despite not fighting in one of the rounds of the tournament last year, and then finished in the finals. So that was kind of weird to me. Jekka I get for the whole Indonesia thing, and he had some really like highlight reel finishes before that. So I get that, but Ija felt like he was kind of at that level. Choi Sung-gu, probably, since he's still like young, somewhat inexperienced, was okay with him not getting a contract. But if he would have competed in a really exciting fight, I wouldn't have been surprised if like Choi would have got a contract last year. But yeah, I can totally forgive the guys for not having the most competitive or not having the most exciting fights in the semifinals. Do you think that having insane cardio and a great chin is a big asset in a fighter generally? Well, yeah, it gives you the longevity to be able to implement your game plan. If you're like think about Alistair Overeem in his later in his career, like if your chin is really bad, then you're having to reorient your whole strategy to be more defensive and like protect your chin. And if you know you don't have good cardio, it means that you're going to have to decrease the volume of strikes that you throw. It means that it's going to change the way that you wrestle and grapple. It changes everything. It puts a lot more limits on what you can do. If you have having a good chin and good cardio releases some of those limits for your strategy and being able to bring out the best of the rest of your skills. Yeah, that's kind of how I see it. If they do make a show in China, will it be in the PI like Road to UFC? That arena seems small on TV. Maybe it's bigger than we see. Have you ever visited the PI? Either PI? No, I haven't. If they go to China, most likely I think they'll go to Shanghai, which would be the Mercedes-Benz arena. If they honestly, well, yeah, so that'd be the Mercedes-Benz arena. I was about to say the Road to UFC would be at the PI, but they won't even. It'll be just one event. It won't be two separate events like the first two rounds of Road to UFC. So that'll most likely be at the Mercedes-Benz arena. I mean, yeah, you got to think if they have Zhang Weili, they're trying to sell tickets too. You can't sell very many tickets at the PI. So, and they want to get as many fans there as they can. So they're going to have it at an arena. Unless if not at Mercedes-Benz, then they'll go to Beijing to the Cadillac Arena, or they'll go to. I think it might have been. Maybe the name was changed from Cadillac. I can't remember. But yeah, and what I'm interested is if once they hit back at like Shanghai, Beijing, are they going to go to other places like Guangzhou? Are they going to go to Xi'an? These are things I actually, I'm going to make a video in like a month maybe about places in Asia that the UFC could go. And I heard a quote from Lawrence Epstein, the UFC's chief operations officer, who I think probably manages a lot of like the event management stuff for UFC. And he was saying, he listed out the criteria that they look for when scouting locations. And it was like a modern event with a proven track record of holding large scale events. It was being able to have potentially local athletes on the card. It was like the economy of that city, and also like being able to attract what kind of target audience they could attract in that city, which I don't really know how to gauge the second two things about the target audience and the economy, but it kind of gave me a little bit more of a filter of like, why haven't we seen a UFC event in Africa yet? Why haven't we seen a UFC event in all of these countries that you would think would be layups? Like today, I just kind of got a random thought of like, why hasn't the UFC should be going to like Lima, Peru in the near future, right? They've got tons of Peruvian fighters, South American fans. I feel like are some of the most underserved fans in terms of live events historically. And it seems like now's the time, like they could have an amazing show in Lima, Peru. And I looked and they just didn't really have like a like very modern basketball type arena that I think would really work. That held more than just a few thousand people. Unless I missed it. But yeah, so like some of these places you think, why don't they go there? Well, it's because of the arena. And even like, the Bellator has gone to Hawaii several times, and the UFC is just like, yeah, it's so hard to go to Hawaii. But I don't know. I think there's just something different about what they want. Maybe just a little bit of a bigger show than what Hawaii can give, or what it's at the Blaisdell Arena in Honolulu. I don't know what their hang up is with that arena, but it works for Bellator. Sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there. But yeah, probably it should be at the Mercedes-Benz in Shanghai. Have you seen that user thread about working with Whaley's camp and releasing her actual scattering report and some of her training? Thoughts on that thread and having a film guy come to camp? Yeah, that user and some of his colleagues, they do film study for Zhang Weili. Like they reached out to me in the last couple of weeks. So yeah, I know what you're talking about. I follow those guys. And yeah, I think I would be careful. Like if I were them, I would be careful. They probably are not putting out everything, but I'd be careful putting out a lot of like, I mean, you don't want to give out the blueprint on how to beat Zhang Weili. But yeah, I follow them. It is pretty sharp stuff. I've enjoyed following them for sure. Then you said you don't know that user used to have a segment on Drake Riggs' show called Phantom Punch Breakdown. I didn't know that, which morphed into Tactical Tuesday, which somehow led to him getting invited to Whaley's camp. Okay, gotcha. Did not know that history. Yeah. Do you remember Kunlun Fight? Yes, I do. Why did they disband their MMA promotion? I used to watch it for kickboxing since they had some big names like Luka and even Valentina Shevchenko fight there. Totally. Like, yeah, they used to be one of like the really big names in China for MMA. And I think they used to have like separate kickboxing and MMA events, but then the pandemic hit, and since then they haven't really, they actually do promote like one MMA event or one MMA fight per event. It's not of anybody you or I have heard of, but it's just so weird to me why they would, like, what's the point of that? Why not just put another kickboxing fight on the card? But I don't know why they shifted away from that. Maybe they just felt like they were going back to the roots, or maybe they felt like for them, more of their fan base were more kickboxing, because kickboxing is, I don't know the numbers behind it, but I think it's pretty big in China. Like a lot of people practice Sanda, and so that's pretty big. So yeah, I think they're just making that choice, and maybe they just saw the MMA market is getting more and more fragmented in China with a lot of other players. So yeah, maybe they felt like if they couldn't have all of like the best Chinese MMA fighters, they didn't really want to be in the business of it. So yeah, no more MMA for Kunlun, or really hardly any. Is Matrix Fight Night the promotion with the strange floor? You're thinking of Octagon, that's a Kazakh promotion. But I can see where you got there, thinking about the Matrix and all the characters streaming across the screen. Said before that you used to train with James Krause. Under James Krause. I wouldn't say I trained with him. Bar the nonsense betting, what is his wall wrestling system like? David Onama and Brandon Moreno, wall wrestling really improved under him. Yeah, I don't know if I can speak much to the system. I know he did put out in the last couple of years a video series on that. But yeah, I remember like when I trained there, we did that a lot. Like we did a lot of work with your back to the cage. And, you know, it was interesting. I remember one of my first weeks at Glory MMA was where we were training, we were drilling where you have your back to the cage, and then you use like a Kimura, you like bend over and use a Kimura grip and basically use it to like exit out the side. And then as you're like breaking away, you throw a head kick. And you know, that always just like stuck with me because it was one of my first sessions at Glory MMA. And then Julian Marquez, who was a long time Glory MMA fighter. I don't know where he's training at now, if that's Factory X or what, but he, in his Contender Series fight, used that exact technique to knock out Phil Hawes. And I was really excited when I saw that, because I was like, man, like, yeah, I remember being like, I know where he got that from. And I also used to, I sparred a couple times with Phil Hawes, or not Phil Hawes, with Julian Marquez back when he was like a 2-0 pro. But I think it was like one of the most insane, maybe like the farthest I've ever pushed myself physically, and then like a couple levels beyond how far I could push myself physically. But it was like we did a Shark Tank where you start off with your back against the wall, and if basically like you're trying to get out from the wall, if you can like exit, you can like reverse or exit from behind the wall, then you're off the hook, you're back in line. But otherwise, like if the guy takes you down, then you're still there. You just have to like get taken down by guy after guy. And I remember Julian Marquez was in my group. It was just a time for us to practice that wall wrestling, and it was I would say this was just pure luck. But and Gray, this was 2015, and things were totally different. I'm not bragging about this, but somehow I managed to get his back and almost like lock in a rear naked choke, and like had him in a choke position, and he still got the advantage in that. But at one point I was just thinking like, am I about to like tap out Julian Marquez? Like that would be really crazy. But that was probably the most like successful thing I ever did at Glory MMA. Like the most, and like I don't know anything besides like sparring with David Onama and that. But yeah, I remember being exhausted in a whole new level doing that Shark Tank kind of wall wrestling. But they definitely drill it a lot. So it is no surprise to me that Brandon Moreno and Onama have gotten a lot better there for sure. But yeah, Shamey is gone. Yeah, betting aside, like it's too bad that he was such a great asset to the sport. And maybe we don't know what's going to happen with this betting thing yet. We have no idea where the status, how far they are into that, anything. But I mean, that'd be great if like they found out that he was innocent and he was suddenly back into the sport of MMA. That'd be awesome. We'd love that. But yeah, glad to see Nandine Erdine move in on Rhodes tournament. He's the most Korean style fighter around without being Korean. Yeah, not a lot of Koreans left in that tournament. So, but I agree with you. He's not. I don't believe he's Korean, but agree. I didn't catch most of those Road FC fights just because like I was getting up at 2 a.m. and Road FC started at 8 o'clock my time, and so I watched it for about an hour and then went to bed because yeah, last weekend was a crazy weekend. But back to the Liang Na question, what would you suggest to change tactically? Just tighten things up. That's what I would say is first of all, tighten things up and then work on her wrestling as well. I think those would be the two things. She has some really cool grappling ideas that if you put it in a fundamentally sound fighter can do some damage. Totally. Yeah, how will Lee Kai-Wen and Yi Jia go? Will Kai-Wen have to train at Alpha Male? I don't know yet. I would think Yi Jia will probably stay at he's been PI'd longer. So it wouldn't surprise me if Lee Kai-Wen went to Alpha Male. That's probably the most likely scenario in my opinion. I'm picking Yi Jia there. His grappling is really, really good. I need to do some study on Lee Kai-Wen's takedown defense. Not totally sure what that is like, but I think Yi Jia's striking is not bad either. It's just hard for me to pick. It's hard for me to not pick him against anybody. So I'm picking Yi Jia there. I think he's probably gonna take a couple rounds there. Liang Na's biggest problem is that she doesn't maintain position long enough before going for a finish. Yeah, she's too aggressive. I agree. She barely gets any position before moving on. She doesn't really solidify anything. And she's only competitive in round 1, falls off a cliff in round 2. Yep. Thoughts on Lamocha's, you had to ask about this. Lamocha's weight cut video that kind of went viral. You guys, sometimes there are times for me as an MMA media member, and maybe even just a fan, where I'm like, what am I even like? In being involved with this sport, am I encouraged? Like, you have to take a step back and be like, what are we doing here? Like, we are literally waiting for someone to die. We are just like, well, no one's died yet, so we're just going to keep doing it. And it's just so stupid. Like, it's like, it literally makes me mad when I see fighters that would rather do that to themselves than fight at like flyweight or even bantamweight. Like Alash used to fight at bantamweight. Yeah, I was pretty ticked when I saw that. I can't even imagine that it's bringing out Lamosha's best performances either. Like, dude, just freaking go up to flyweight, please. I mean, with that kind of weight cut, it's probably still going to be an intense weight cut at flyweight, but it is literally like my least favorite part of all of MMA is weight cutting, extreme weight cutting like that. If you didn't see the video, basically just it was a weight cutting video for Lemos where she gets out of one of those little like heat chamber boxes and she looked terrible. Everyone was kind of holding her up. She was walking extremely slowly. She looked like a corpse. It was pretty rough. Yeah, I really hope they keep Migu. They should be around for a couple more years. So, yeah, no fear there. The content they produce is nothing I've ever seen for any other MMA content creator. They have specific docs for specific fighters for workout vids. And I don't know if you know this, but fans can even send fighters video messages of support before they go out. I sent one to Weili in Jinliang. Oh yeah, Li Jingliang last year. Dude, that's so sick. I didn't know that either. That was really, really cool. I know. I even wondered, like, with India's rights deal coming up, ending at the end of this year, I wonder if like the Migu deal is really like, is that going to change some of the other deals that the UFC cuts with other broadcasting companies in other countries? Like something like that for India, I feel like would also be like a slam dunk, or even for Indonesia, a slam dunk. Like those fan bases are so supportive of their fighters. And Migu has done so much more than just showing the fights, or even like having other kinds of broadcasting, like mini documentaries and talk show panels, things like that. But yeah, I love what Migu is doing for sure. When do you think the UFC will go back to Singapore in 2024? June next year, maybe the same time next year. I'm not totally sure, and I'm working on this video script. I spent the majority of the day of it trying to map out everything I know about the UFC's 2024 schedule, as well as everywhere that I think the UFC will or could go next year. And I feel like I've got like a lot of it figured out in my mind. Nothing like newsworthy. So like, it's all just guessing, but kind of filling in all the pieces of like, okay, well, they got to go to T-Mobile Arena 4 times. They're going to go to Abu Dhabi in October, New York, November, all that kind of stuff. But Singapore, I'm not totally sure about. As in, I'm not sure, especially with that comment about Jakarta earlier. They could go to Singapore, but it would be hard for me to believe that they would go to Jakarta and Singapore next year and China. They would like with the Migu deal. The Migu deal said that they were going to ramp up the number of events in China. And so far, so that was in 2021. 2021, ramping up the number of events in China, like they haven't been able to do that. And if they can hold that event later this year, then it wouldn't surprise me if we saw 2 events in China next year, maybe in the summer, then at the end of the year. So I don't know. I really don't know where Singapore fits into that. It's hard for me to see them going to China twice if they go to Jakarta and then going to Singapore. So I don't know. And in their media deal with their deal with the Singapore Tourism Board is up, so they don't have an obligation as far as I know. I don't know. Singapore is cool, but I'm not sure if it fits into the plans. The official ministry channel uploaded a video of it, Kevin Chong checking the new arena. I can share the links to the video or whatever. Oh, totally. Yeah, send me that. Absolutely send me that link so I don't have to go looking everywhere for it. I really appreciate that. Shoot it to me on either on any social media, for sure. Since when can people be friends with a third party but not like each other? Meaning just because you have a mutual friend doesn't mean you can't dislike each other. I'd have to have an example. I mean, I feel like that's fairly common, right? Like if a lot of people like Dana White, a lot of fighters like Dana White, but they don't like each other. Yeah, you may have to elaborate on that. Maybe you already have. Did you see Peter Daniso get submitted? I did. That was sad since he had an insane KO earlier this year. Yeah, really young kid. He's not a kid. He's 22, 23 years old. Really young guy. Just a few fights under his belt. I don't even know. It's like what if? I'm sure they can break apart what he could have done differently. He just got blasted from the literal opening second of that fight. Just got blasted and was never in that fight. Defensively, there could have been some ways that he could have responded, but yeah, he'll be back. I'm sure we'll get him back. Potentially, maybe road to UFC next year. I think the UFC really wants to break into Thailand. Let me look at this UFC Thailand account to see if it's an actual. You see these accounts, and it's like the official Instagram of UFC Thailand. But is it really? Again, everything on here looks like official UFC content. There's only 86 followers. Also joined February of 2023. So I'm guessing whoever started the Indonesia account also started this Thailand account. It's kind of an indicator that the UFC wants to go big on Thailand, which is really interesting considering what One Championship is doing in Thailand. But yeah, I would think the UFC wants to keep giving Dan So a shot. So wouldn't surprise me if he's in road to UFC next year. Might even be good to give him a non-tournament fight, or even just let him fight regionally. Go to Rising, fight in Japan, something like that. That'd be cool. I prefer road to UFC format. Contender Series was always silly and has since become pointless since almost everyone gets signed now to keep fighter pay low. Yeah, it is. Those are the common complaints about Contender Series. When you first started watching Contender Series, it really did feel like, man, only like 1, 2, maybe 3 fighters were going to get signed from Contender Series. But now it is a much lower bar of entry. But I still enjoy the fights. I definitely still enjoy the fights, which is the heart of the show. But the tension and thrill of Dana being gone for 30 minutes deliberating with the matchmakers and then coming back and giving 1 or 2 fighters a contract. That was so cool, and wish that it was a little bit more like that. But yeah, great way to keep fighter contracts starting low. And it's not even managers can't even negotiate that. That's just the Contender Series contract. You like it or you don't. So it's great for the UFC, especially bringing in all of their North American talent, for sure. Do you think Naim Jargal gets signed? Don't see how he doesn't. I'm confused with the non-tournament bouts and what they mean. Showcase, I understand, but no one has been signed from them. Well, no, we had Zhang Min Yang got signed last year. I think that I don't think there's any one purpose for the showcase fights. For some fighters, it is just a way for them to get more experience. For other fighters, they may actually be able to be rewarded with a UFC contract. But yeah, I think there's different uses of it. But for Naim Jargal, it did feel like there was a little bit of like a mini flyweight tournament going on. And I'm going to follow up with him and see if he's been offered anything. But yeah, I think we'll see him get signed for sure. Do you feel like UFC 275 and UFC Holloway versus Zombie were weak on paper but delivered on excitement when the fights actually happened? They should probably go there more often with subpar names. Yeah. Honestly, I had no problem with these fight cards. UFC 275 had 2 title fights. I didn't feel like those were weak at all. And granted, it was a June pay-per-view. June pay-per-views are typically not the strongest of pay-per-views because the next month is International Fight Week. There's 2 pay-per-views typically in July. So June, and we saw that this year with the Nunes versus Aldana card in Vancouver. Not typically the strongest cards, but I thought, yeah, June's a great time to go to Singapore for events like that. And Max Holloway versus Korean Zombie is not a main event that you put on an Apex show. Like, that's a live audience show. You had basically 2 other fights on there that could be fight night main events. Santos versus Blanchfield was a main event in February before it fell through. And then Smith versus Spann was a main event as well the first time they fought. So no, I thought it was a great card, to be honest. And you're right, they totally delivered on entertainment. Just pronounced Ghost. Gotcha. Kickboxing still rules in Asia. MMA is second. Yeah, I can see that, especially like got Japan. Lethwei is big in Southeast Asia. Yeah, I agree with that. What type of wall wrestling that you mentioned about the Kimura and ending with the head kick sounds really interesting. Do you know if his vids are free? I doubt they are. And I'm not even sure if they're still up, considering everything that's gone on. But yeah, I just heard Luke Thomas talking about those videos and how they're really insightful. So I have not personally checked them out. Is Chris the next MMA prospect? TBD. That's all I can say about that. This is what I mentioned last week. Always an excuse whenever Whaley gets a great win. Most lost to a bad weight cut. Carlo was unmotivated. You know, this isn't just a Whaley thing, but it is like really funny to me when I hear the argument of like, fighter X isn't even a good fighter. Their only good wins were against these 5 really good fighters. Like, I know that, like, it feels like there's a lot of debate right now about Valentina Shevchenko. And yeah, she's really, really good. I don't know where she stands as an all-time, like, great women's MMA fighter. But I saw someone on Twitter make the argument yesterday of, like, Shevchenko is not that good. Her only wins are over this person, this person, this person, this person. I'm like, those are 4 really good fighters. Yeah, like not every single fighter you face is going to be a number 1 contender, like a perfectly well-rounded world beater. And you gotta understand, like, women's MMA at the highest level has only been around for a decade. So, like, when Shevchenko becoming champion, like, yeah, she fought Jessica Ai, Liz Carmouche, like, fighters, like, decent fighters that are not like top level fighters, but they were the best fighters at the time. Yeah, I don't really want to get into like too far down that rabbit hole, but it is like, you're right that like there's always a lot of excuses that people have for like, this person isn't good because all of these reasons. I'm like, okay, but like, these are the best fighters available. So, yeah. How did I first get involved with Asian MMA? Yeah, great question. how I got involved was, and I'm probably going to, by the way, y'all, I may wrap up this question just in case my freaking battery goes out. Yeah, this may be my last question. Maybe I'll touch on the rest, but I don't want it to have I don't want to have an abrupt finish here. But so yeah, Asian MMA. I got into MMA in 2007 when I was a senior in high school. My first UFC event, live MMA event that I watched was UFC 77, Silva versus Franklin 2. And then throughout college, I'd kind of trained off and on MMA, like even when I was in high school, trained a little bit of boxing, trained a little bit of jiu-jitsu, both on my own and also at some gyms in high school or in college. And then I studied abroad in China and also just traveled on 2 separate trips throughout college. The first one, I was there for it was the better part of a year. Lived in Xi'an, China. And then 2 years later, I went back for a couple months in the summer and just got to travel around a lot, got to hit up Xi'an again, was mostly on the East Coast around Shanghai, Suzhou, Nanjing, Changzhou, a lot of those cities in that area. So that was kind of my entry point, was through China. But when I was in China the first time, I got to train Sonda with some, I think they were police majors at a university, and I got to train with them and watch Sonda tournaments live there. And this was 2011. I remember when I was there was like some guys from Team Quest that were coming over and doing a seminar in Xi'an for like a training camp for like 6 weeks in Xi'an. And that was at the Xi'an Physical Education University, which has pumped out, I think, a couple MMA fighters. I think Jumabiaka Torshun, if you remember him, early UFC Chinese fighter. He came out of there. But yeah, so I think, and then ever since I came back from China, I was always just kind of watching, like, yeah, who's coming up through China? Is there anything going on? That would be so cool to have a UFC event in China. And then eventually they had Ultimate Fighter China, which was a bust, but at least we had something going on, and have just kind of like, I don't know, been rooting for something to happen. And then, like, I don't know, I think it's just through like different friendships that I've had with different people. I've lived in a college town. Before I lived here in Portland, I lived in a college town for 9 years and had a lot of friends from a lot of different countries. Had a lot of Indian friends that I was really close with. So I got to learn a lot about their culture. One of my best friends is married to an Indonesian girl from Indonesia, and just by being, and he's traveled there a lot. Just by being friends with him, I've learned more about Indonesia. At one point, I was learning Korean, trying to like plan a trip to Korea, and so I learned some basic Korean. I learned some basic Arabic in college. So just I've kind of like learned a lot about a lot of different, I don't know, just have different access points throughout the last 10, 15 years of life to different Asian cultures. And of course, I got a degree in cultural anthropology in college as well. So that kind of gave me an excuse to learn about a lot of, like learning about Chinese history and things like that. So I think that's kind of where I have connected to it. And then I started an Instagram page, what was that, February 2021, for MMA, just to post like cool MMA photography on there. And then eventually just kind of transitioned it a little bit to focus on the Asian side of things, just because I was like, man, I've always really been excited about watching, like, honestly, like my favorite UFC events have always been the ones that start at like 2 a.m, where I wake up and it's pitch black and I don't want to do that every weekend for sure, but like, yeah, where it's pitch black and watching these Asian fighters compete. I don't know, for some reason, those have always been my favorite events. And so I just have always felt that like there's such this big gap between Western or English speaking MMA media and what's going on in Asia. Like no one knows what's going on in China. Japan, we do have some great people reporting on that. And so honestly, that's like I've always wanted to ramp up my Japanese reporting and coverage, but I'm like, okay, at least we have some English speaking people that are covering Japanese MMA. But yeah, basically like what always excited me was like the UFC's global expansion, like where are they going to go to next, signing fighters from different countries that we haven't had before, having events for the first time in various countries. For some reason, that's been like the most exciting part of following MMA for me in UFC. So it's basically, I was just like, I just want to report and cover my favorite part of MMA and UFC. So that's what I've done. Try to fill in those gaps. I have a long-term vision for this that is so much bigger than what I'm doing right now. The first step of that, the next step forward of that is monetizing this Instagram account. So that would be 1,000 followers or 1,000 subscribers. But yeah, that's how I got into Asian MMA. And you would not believe how quickly I was able to make connections with people and fighters and managers throughout Asian MMA just by being someone covering it. And trying my best to be professional, not always being professional. I don't have formal journalism training, but just like these fighters with 500 followers have this guy in the US that's like posting these mini articles about them, and they're following me back. They're sharing my stuff. They're excited about that. So that's how I got into it and have been able to, I think, make connections faster maybe than I would if I was just covering it, the same way a lot of outlets are. And that's already being done. Like, I'm not gonna, like, Ariel Helwani isn't going anywhere. Luke Thomas isn't going anywhere. MMA Junkie Fighting, like, those places aren't going anywhere. So I wanted to start something for myself, and I wanted to do something different. So yeah, long way of answering your question. Whaley had a video on Xiaopeng where she was struggling with her weight cut for Carla, but hey, it's Carla's fault for losing that fight. Enough said. What editing software do I use? This is going to be embarrassing. I'm not using the editing software that I want to use long term. Right now I'm using iMovie. It's basic, it's free. I've outgrown iMovie and I need to find the next best thing. I'm basically trying to find like the best free software. Eventually I'll start dropping some cash for some higher end stuff. But yeah, I've been editing videos since I was 13, 14 years old, guys. Like I love editing videos, and I've worked with I've done the Final Cut Pro, Adobe Premiere kind of stuff before, but yeah, eventually I'll have better stuff. But using iMovie now, there's a web-based video editing software that another, like an Instagram influencer, recommended, and I tried it and it was pretty good. There were some things about it I really, really liked, but maybe just one or two little drawbacks that I just went back to iMovie just because of the speed and simplicity of it. But if you know of any like good, free or super cheap editing softwares, let me know. It's not going to be something I use forever, but maybe just to get me a little bit farther down the road. What's really important to me is being able to move quickly. I spend sometimes way more time editing than I would like to. So yeah, being able to move quickly. I'm like, every week I'm trying to streamline my editing process thinking through like how can I quickly and efficiently put out videos without like any extra fat. So yeah, that's something I'm learning, and that's why I'm glad I'm doing the weekly video thing, just to get better and better at that. But yeah, yeah, very little on wall wrestling on YouTube. Would have been awesome to see more come out to understand the positions. Let's see, awesome story. I love the meaning behind it all. Hey, yeah, appreciate that, Hype 3 MMA. It's just the beginning. That's what I can tell you. It's just the beginning. Is there a video editing software that allows you to write on videos? If you're talking about text, that's most editing software. So for social media, for apps, so like Instagram and even some YouTube videos, like YouTube Shorts kind of stuff, CapCut. CapCut is the way to go if you're editing on your phone. So fast, couldn't be more intuitive. Lots of great features, free. They do have a paid version, but the free version has been amazing for me. Eventually, I'll probably get the paid. Oh, like drawing arrows and circles is what you meant. There are, but I don't know about a free one. I'm not sure if iMovie can do that. iMovie is the native Apple video editing software, so I don't think you can do that on there. What I usually do for graphics is I'll use Canva, and with Canva you absolutely can put all types of shapes and whatnot. So if I have a video and I'm making slides on, if I have slides on the video, I make the slides in Canva and then just save them as picture files and put them into the video. That takes out so much headache from trying to finagle with all of that with layers in video editing softwares. So yeah, I use Canva for that, kind of my shortcut around that. But photos are very high quality. I appreciate that. And yeah, I really, for me, like I only try to use high quality photos because I think when I got into like the Instagram thing, I was like, okay, this is Instagram. Instagram is all about photos and how things look. So like, if I can't make things look amazing, then I can't compete with other people. They have to be like top of the line quality. Eventually, unfortunately, none of the photos, except for like 2 or 3 photos I posted, none of those photos are mine. So props to all the people that I've used photos from. But eventually, a lot more photos and video will be mine. That factors into the whole long-term plan I have. But yeah, there'll be a lot more original stuff going forward. Maybe not this year, but hopefully next year. But all right, yeah, and thanks, Jimmy. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Really fun chat, great questions. Appreciate just, yeah, there was a lot of questions this week. Fun stuff, a lot of different topics, but today I was just like, man, I'm really looking forward to 4 o'clock. It's just a really fun time. So thanks so much, guys, for everything. Appreciate it. Appreciate your support. Subscribe if you haven't. Not on, gosh, been talking too long. Subscribe if you haven't already. But otherwise, enjoy UFC Paris. Enjoy the other fights I mentioned, and we'll see you next time.